3 months had passed since the incident. The Galactic Council station had returned to its normal rhythms of diplomacy and trade, but something fundamental had changed. The way species looked at humans was different now. More careful, more respectful, sometimes fearful but always taking them seriously. Bora walked through the station corridors on her way to her first official assignment as a junior diplomat. At 23, she was young for the position, but the expansion of human diplomatic efforts meant they needed more personnel. She had been training for this moment for 2 years, studying alien cultures and learning the complex dance of interstellar politics. A group of Talaran merchants moved aside as she approached, nodding respectfully. 6 months ago, they might have ignored her completely. Humans had been seen as naive newcomers to galactic affairs. Not anymore. She arrived at the human embassy quarters and was surprised to find Ambassador Doyen waiting for her. "Ambassador," she said, trying not to show her nervousness, "I didn't expect to see you today. I thought you were meeting with the Morgathi delegation." "That meeting was postponed," Doyen said with a slight smile. "I wanted to see you before you shipped out to your assignment." "May I walk with you?" "Of course, sir." They walked through the corridors together. Doyen moved with his usual calm grace, acknowledging other diplomats who greeted him. Some with warmth, some with wariness, but all with respect. "I've read your assignment briefing," Doyen said. "You're going to the Kepler station. It's a good post for a first assignment. Lots of trade negotiations, cultural exchanges. Relatively quiet." "I'm looking forward to it," Bora said. Then, because she had to ask, "Sir, can I ask you something about what happened? About the Vex situation?" Doyen nodded. "Of course. In training, they taught us that diplomacy is about finding middle ground, about compromise. But what you did?"
"What we did."
"That wasn't compromise. How do we balance those two things? How do we know when to negotiate and when to not?" Doyen stopped walking and turned to face her. "That's the right question to ask. And here's the answer. We negotiate everything. Trade agreements, territory rights, cultural disputes, resource allocations, everything. We are generous in our negotiations. We give more than we take when possible. We build relationships and trust." He paused, looking out a viewport at the stars beyond. "But there are some things written in stone, not sand. Some principles that cannot be compromised. For humans, the protection of children is one of those principles. You'll find that most species have similar non-negotiable values. The key is knowing what they are and respecting them. But how do you know where that line is?" "You feel it," Doyen said simply. "When you're facing a situation and every part of you says this is wrong, this cannot be allowed, that's when you know you've reached a principle that matters more than diplomacy. The important thing is to be clear about where those lines are. Don't hide them. Don't pretend they don't exist. Tell people clearly, just like I told the council." Bora nodded slowly. "I understand." Across the station in one of the educational centers, Minji stood in front of a mixed class of children from a dozen different species. She was one of the children who had been taken by the Vex. Now, 3 months later, she was part of a program where the rescued children talked about their experience to help other young beings understand what had happened. "I was scared," Minji told the class honestly. "When the Vex took us, I didn't know what would happen. But Hana, she's younger than me, and she kept singing. She knew her dad would come for us. She knew all our parents would come for us. And they did." A small Morgathi child raised a tentacle. "Were the Vex mean to you?" "No," Minji said thoughtfully. "They kept us in a room and gave us food. They didn't hurt us. I think they didn't understand what they had done. They thought it was just politics. They didn't understand that taking someone's children isn't politics. It's war." In another part of the station, Ambassador Jihoon of the Lorne species met with Doyen in a private conference room. The Lorne had requested this meeting weeks ago, and the human ambassador had finally found time in his schedule. "Thank you for seeing me," Jihoon said. "I wanted to discuss a proposal. My people have observed how humans protect their young. We have similar values, though perhaps not as strongly felt. We wish to propose a formal alliance based on shared principles." Doyen leaned forward with interest. "What kind of alliance?" "A mutual defense pact specifically focused on the protection of children. Not just our children and yours, but all children. We have noticed that since the Hana Protocol was passed, enforcement has been inconsistent. Some species take it seriously. Others pay only lip service to it. We want to create a coalition that will actively work to protect young members of all species." "That's an ambitious goal." Doyen said carefully. It is, but necessary. The Vex incident showed that there are still species who view children as acceptable leverage. We need to change that thinking across the entire galaxy. With human military capabilities and Lorne diplomatic influence, we could make real progress. Doyen considered this. Let me discuss it with my government. But I think you'll find humanity very interested in this proposal. Over the following weeks, other species approached with similar proposals. The Telrathi, who valued education above all else, wanted to collaborate on programs to protect students of all species. The Belgarians, focused on justice, wanted to establish courts specifically for crimes against children. The Morgothi, with their long lifespans and patience, offered to fund long-term protective infrastructure across the galaxy. What emerged was not a military alliance, but something more subtle and potentially more powerful. A coalition of species united by the principle that children of all species deserved protection. They called themselves different things in different languages, but humans called them the Protective Alliance. Hana returned to school at the council station. Security was tighter now, but the children barely noticed. They were too busy playing and learning. She sat in her classroom, a mix of human and alien children working on a project about different cultures. What did you learn from your experience? Her teacher asked her. It was a gentle question, asked in private while the other students worked on their projects. Hana thought about it seriously. I learned that my dad keeps his promises, and I learned that when someone does something really wrong, sometimes you have to stop them. Not because you're mean, but because it's the only way to make things right. That's very wise, her teacher said. My dad says that we should always try to solve problems with words first. But he also says that some rules are more important than being nice, and everyone needs to know which rules are which. The teacher, a Telleran who had once thought humans were too emotional and irrational, nodded slowly. 3 months ago, she would have argued that rationality should always prevail. Now she understood that some things were too important for pure rationality. Some principles had to be absolute. In the council chamber, a new debate was taking place. A species was requesting membership in the council. The review process was standard until someone asked a new question. What are your species' principles regarding the protection of young members? The question was now mandatory for all new species. The answer mattered. Species that couldn't demonstrate strong protective measures for their children found their applications delayed until they could implement better safeguards. The galaxy was changing. Slowly, carefully, but unmistakably, the incident with the Vex had done more than punish one coalition. It had forced every species to examine their own values regarding children. Some species strengthened laws that had grown weak. Others created new protections that had never existed before. All of them understood that humanity had drawn a line in the stars and meant to defend it. Doyen stood at his viewport again, watching ships come and go from the council station. Hana was safe at school. The diplomatic work continued. Relations with other species were better than he had dared hope 3 months ago. Fear had given way to understanding. Understanding had led to cooperation. Cooperation was building something new. Jiwan joined him at the viewport. Admiral Minho sends his regards. The fleet is standing down from high alert. We're back to normal patrol status. Good, Doyen said. How are you holding up? Better now that we're past the crisis. I've been working with other species' security forces on joint protocols for child protection. It's actually bringing us closer together. That's the hope, Doyen said, that something good can come from something terrible. They stood together in comfortable silence. Outside, the galaxy turned. Millions of species going about their lives, trading, talking, learning from each other, and now, protecting each other's children. Because humanity had taught them a lesson that the galaxy would not forget. Some principles are worth fighting for. Some lines cannot be crossed. And when someone tells you who they are and what they value most, you should believe them. The warning had been clear. Harm a human child and you won't survive to regret it. The galaxy had learned, and in learning, it had become something better than it was before. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so full. Representatives from every member species crowded into the space, many standing because there wasn't enough room for everyone to sit. The air recycling system struggled to handle the mix of different atmospheric requirements. Tensions ran high. Doyen walked through the center of the chamber toward the human podium. The crowd parted for him, but not out of respect. Species that had been friendly a week ago now looked at him with something between fear and anger. The murmuring was loud enough that translators struggled to separate individual voices. The council arbiter struck the resonance crystal that called for order. The sound cut through the noise, and gradually the chamber quieted. We are here to address the human actions against the Vex Coalition. Multiple species have demanded that humanity face consequences for these actions. Ambassador Doyen, you will answer for what your species has done. Doyen stood at his podium and looked across the thousands of faces watching him. I will answer, he agreed. But first, I want to be clear about what happened. 4 of our children were kidnapped. They were taken by Vex operatives and moved to Vex territory. We asked for their return. We set a deadline. That deadline was ignored, so we went and got them ourselves. You destroyed an entire fleet, shouted a delegate from a species allied with the Vex. You crippled a homeworld. You violated every principle of proportional response. Did we? Doyen asked calmly. Let me bring in someone who can explain our perspective better than I can. An older man walked to the podium. He wore simple academic robes and carried a data tablet. I am Sungjin. I teach history. Human history, specifically. The council asked me to provide context for our response. The arbiter nodded. Proceed. Sungjin activated a holographic display. Images began to appear above the chamber floor. This is Troy, an ancient human city. According to our legends, it was destroyed in a war that lasted 10 years. The cause? The taking of one woman. This is Rome, an empire that lasted 1,000 years. One of its most famous laws made harming a child a crime punishable by death, with no possibility of appeal or mercy. More images appeared. Events from human history that many in the council had never heard of. Wars started over kidnapped children. Empires that fell because they failed to protect their young. Leaders overthrown because they were seen as threats to children. You have to understand, Sungjin said, that humans did not evolve as the strongest species on our world. We were not the fastest or the most well-armed by nature. We survived because we protected our young better than any other species. A human child takes years to mature. They are vulnerable for a long time. So we developed instincts, culture, and laws that made harming a child the worst crime imaginable. He paused and looked around the chamber. Every human society, regardless of location or time period, has had this same value. Harm a human child and you have declared yourself an enemy of the entire species. There is no negotiation, because there is no universe where we accept that harm. The response is not proportional to the damage done. It is proportional to the damage that could have been done. A delegate from the Morgothi species stood. But the children were unharmed. Surely once you knew this, the response should have been different. Legal expert Una stepped forward. She was young for a council legal advisor, but her reputation was solid. That's an interesting question. Let me answer it from a legal perspective. The Vex Coalition took 4 children from neutral ground. They moved them to their sovereign territory. They refused to return them. They attempted to use them as leverage in a trade negotiation. Under human law, these actions constitute several crimes: kidnapping, hostage-taking, threatening the welfare of children. The fact that the children were eventually recovered unharmed doesn't erase those crimes. But the destruction, another delegate began, was a military response to an act of war, Una interrupted. The Vex could have returned the children within the deadline. They chose not to. They could have provided proof the children were unharmed. They chose not to. They made it clear they were willing to use children as tools in political negotiations. That crossed a line that humans cannot and will not tolerate. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some species supported the human position. Others demanded sanctions. Still others called for humanity to be expelled from the council entirely. The arbiter struck the resonance crystal again and again, trying to restore order. A new voice cut through the chaos. It came from a species that rarely spoke in council sessions. The Lorn were an old race, almost as old as the council itself. They had watched countless younger species rise and fall. Their delegates stood slowly. We have observed humanity for 20 years, the Lorn delegate said. We have studied their culture, their history, their psychology. We have tried to understand what makes them different from other species. Today we finally understand. The chamber quieted. When the Lorn spoke, others listened. Most species make decisions based on logic and benefit to the group. Humans do this too, but they have hard limits that logic cannot cross. They told us what those limits were. We did not believe them. We thought they were exaggerating or posturing. We were wrong. The Lorne delegate's multiple eyes swept across the chamber. The question before us is not whether the human response was proportional. The question is whether we want a galaxy where children of any species can be used as political tools. Because that is what we are really deciding today. Journalist Nari's report appeared on the screens around the chamber. She had been covering the human public response to the crisis. Across every human world, her recorded voice said, the reaction has been unanimous. There are no protests against the military action. No calls for peace at any cost. No dissenting voices. Every parent, every teacher, every person who has ever cared for a child supports what was done. The recording showed crowds on human worlds watching the news together. There was no celebration, no joy in the violence. Just a quiet, absolute agreement that the response had been necessary. This is what makes humans different, the Lorne delegate continued. They are capable of tremendous violence, but only in defense of principles they consider sacred. They will negotiate anything else. Trade routes, resource rights, territorial disputes. But their children, there is no negotiation. There never will be. The arbiter looked at Doyun. Do you have anything to add, Ambassador? Doyun thought carefully before speaking. We told you who we are. We gave you fair warning. We established clear boundaries. The Vex Coalition chose to cross those boundaries, believing we would not respond as we said we would. They learned that humans mean exactly what we say. He paused, then continued. We don't want to be feared. We don't want to be seen as aggressive or dangerous. We want to be your friends, your trading partners, your allies. But we need you to understand that friendship with humanity comes with one simple requirement: respect our children. That's all. Just that one thing. The vote was called. It took 3 hours. Species caucused in groups, debating among themselves. Some argued that humanity must be punished to maintain order. Others argued that the Vex had brought this on themselves. Still others worried about what it meant to have such a powerful and seemingly unpredictable species in the Council. The final vote was close, but the result was clear. Humanity would not be sanctioned. The Vex Coalition was dissolved, its member species absorbed into other alliances or granted independent status. A new law was proposed and passed with overwhelming support. Acts of violence against children of any species would be met with immediate council intervention and military response if necessary. The law was officially named the Child Protection Act, but everyone knew what it really was. They called it the Hana Protocol, after the little girl whose kidnapping had changed everything. As delegates filed out of the chamber, many approached Doyun. Some apologized for not taking his warning seriously. Others expressed hope that human relations with the Council could be repaired. A few simply nodded, acknowledging that they finally understood. The Lorne delegate stopped beside Doyun. Your daughter is well? She is, thank you. Good, my species has a saying. The measure of a civilization is not how it treats its strongest members, but how it protects its weakest. Today, humanity reminded us all of that truth. The Vex defense coordinator on Velkara noticed the human fleet's arrival with amusement. His fortress world was protected by 200 orbital platforms, each one capable of destroying a battleship. The Vex home fleet numbered 3,000 ships. They had defended this world successfully for longer than most species had possessed space travel. The humans have brought 400 ships, his assistant reported. They're holding position at the system's edge. 400, the coordinator repeated with satisfaction. They'll learn a painful lesson about challenging the Vex Coalition. He activated the communication channel to the human fleet. Human vessels, you are in violation of Vex sovereign space. Depart immediately or be destroyed. Your children are safe and will be returned through proper diplomatic channels. Admiral Minho received this message aboard his flagship. Around him, his bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. They wore expressions of cold focus that would have surprised species who thought of humans as emotional and chaotic. Minho activated his response. This is Admiral Minho of the Human Defense Fleet. You have taken our children. You have 1 hour to return them unharmed to our custody. After that, we will retrieve them ourselves. The Vex coordinator laughed. You face forces that outnumber you nearly 10 to 1. Your ships cannot breach our defenses. Be reasonable. Minho closed the channel without responding. He looked at his tactical officer. Kangman, status on the stealth ships? In position, sir, Kangman reported. They penetrated the defense perimeter 40 minutes ago. The Vex still haven't detected them. Good, ground forces? Commander Taehyun's Marines are ready for deployment. Dr. Sora has medical teams standing by. Minho nodded. He pulled up the tactical display showing Velkara and its orbital defenses. 20 years ago, when humanity first joined the Galactic Council, they had been advised to abandon certain technologies as too dangerous or too aggressive for civilized space. Humanity had agreed publicly while quietly continuing to develop those technologies in secret. Just in case, just for a moment exactly like this. The hour deadline passed. Minho gave a single word: execute. The human fleet split into 3 groups. One appeared to move toward the orbital platforms in a frontal assault. The Vex fleet moved to intercept, confident in their numerical superiority. They never saw the ships that had been hiding in their sensor blind spots for the past hour. The first indication the Vex had that something was wrong came when their orbital platforms simply ceased to exist. Not damaged, not disabled. They detonated in massive explosions as human weapons struck from angles that should have been impossible. 200 platforms became 200 expanding clouds of debris in less than 30 seconds. The Vex fleet commander tried to regroup his forces. Then human ships appeared among his formations. They had been there all along, invisible to Vex sensors. Close-range weapons tore through Vex shields that were designed to stop attacks from a distance. Ships that had served the Coalition for centuries broke apart before they could even target their attackers. Fall back, the Vex fleet commander ordered. Reform at Defense Line Beta. His ship exploded before he could say anything else. The human vessels moved through the Vex fleet like predators through prey. Every movement was calculated. Every shot was precise. There was no chaos, no panic. Just cold, efficient destruction. On the ground, Commander Taehyun led his marine units toward the facility where the children were being held. They had dropped from orbit in stealth pods, landing 3 kilometers from the target. The Vex ground forces never saw them coming. Team 1, secure the perimeter, Taehyun ordered. Team 2, breach the main entrance. Team 3, with me through the East Service Corridor. Rules of engagement: anyone who surrenders will be detained. Anyone who resists will be eliminated. The children are priority 1. Everything else is secondary. The assault was swift and brutal. Vex soldiers who tried to fight back were cut down instantly. Those who dropped their weapons and raised their hands in surrender were quickly secured and moved away from the combat zone. Taehyun's team moved through the facility with practiced precision. They had trained for hostage rescue operations for years. This was what they did. They found the children in a locked room in the facility's center. Hana sat with the 3 other children, singing softly to keep them calm. She looked up when the door burst open, and her face broke into a smile when she saw the human Marines. "I knew you'd come," she said simply. Dr. Sora pushed past the Marines to examine the children. She ran scanners over each one, checking for injuries or signs of harm. "They're scared but physically unharmed," she reported. No signs of abuse or mistreatment. Taehyun knelt down to Hana's level. "Your dad is waiting for you. We're going to take you home now." "Okay," Hana said. Then, with the seriousness that only children can manage, "The Vex soldiers who guarded us weren't mean. They gave us food and water. They didn't hurt us." Taehyun nodded. "We'll remember that." He activated his communication unit. "Admiral Minho, all children are secure and unharmed. Requesting immediate extraction." In orbit, Minho received the message and felt tension he hadn't acknowledged ease slightly. The children were safe. Now came the second part of their mission. "Confirmed. Extraction teams are en route." He switched to a different channel. "Ambassador Doyen, all children are secure and unharmed." On the council station, Doyen closed his eyes briefly. Then he activated his own communication channel. "Admiral, you are authorized to proceed with Phase 2. The Vex Defense Coordinator watched his fleet being destroyed and finally understood that something had gone terribly wrong. He tried to contact the Coalition leadership on the homeworld. The channel opened to show chaos. Alerts were sounding. Ships were exploding in orbit over Velkara Prime, the Coalition's capital world. "This is Admiral Minho," a voice announced on every Vex military channel. "All civilian vessels have 1 hour to evacuate Velkara Prime. After that time, all military assets in the system will be destroyed. This is your only warning." The Coalition leadership scrambled. They tried to negotiate. They tried to threaten. They tried to appeal to the Galactic Council. Nothing worked. Human ships continued their methodical destruction of the Vex fleet. When Vex commanders surrendered, they were allowed to leave in escape pods. When they fought, they died. Exactly 1 hour later, human weapons demonstrated technologies the Vex had thought impossible. Shipyards that had built vessels for 40,000 years vanished in blinding light. Weapons foundries turned to slag. Military command centers simply ceased to exist. The planet itself was untouched. Civilian centers were not targeted. But Velkara Prime's ability to project military power ended in a single devastating hour. The Vex Coalition, one of the oldest and most powerful forces in the galaxy, was broken. Not conquered, not occupied, simply rendered incapable of threatening anyone ever again. On a human medical ship, Hana sat wrapped in a blanket, drinking hot chocolate while Dr. Sora checked her one more time. Through the viewport she could see the stars and the distant shapes of human warships. "Did we win?" she asked. Sora looked at her carefully. "We got you back. That's what mattered." "But did a lot of people get hurt because of us?" Sora knelt beside her. "A lot of people made bad choices. We made the only choice we could make. We protected you." Hana thought about this, then nodded slowly. "My dad says that some rules are more important than anything else." "Your dad is a wise man." The transformation happened in minutes. One moment, the human delegation quarters were the friendly, open spaces of a diplomatic mission. The next, they became something else entirely. Something that made the Council Station security forces nervous when they approached to offer assistance. Doyen entered the operations center that had been disguised as a simple conference room. Panels slid away to reveal screens and communication equipment that seemed far too sophisticated for a peaceful diplomatic mission. Jiwan was already there, coordinating with teams across the station. Captain Hayek stood at a tactical display that showed the entire station in 3 dimensions. "Report," Doyen said. His voice was different now. The gentle diplomat was gone, replaced by something colder and more focused. 4 children taken. "Hana, Yejin, Woojin, and little Suho," Jiwan said. Her voice remained steady, but her hands were clenched into fists. Security footage shows Vex operatives. They used an electromagnetic pulse device to create a blind spot. They entered the maintenance tunnels. "We lost them after Junction 7. "How long ago?" 8 minutes, Doyen nodded once. He activated a communication channel that reached far beyond the Council Station. "This is Ambassador Doyen. Authorization code Phoenix Red. 4 children have been taken by hostile forces. I am implementing Protocol Guardian." Across human space, alarms began to sound. Admiral Minho received the message on his flagship 3 star systems away. He had been drilling his crews on standard maneuvers. Now he gave orders that his officers had trained for but never expected to execute in reality. The entire rapid response fleet began calculating jump coordinates. They would arrive at the Council Station in less than 2 hours. Intelligence Officer Yunji sat up in her quarters on a distant listening post. She activated networks that had been carefully built over 20 years. Information brokers, security feeds, communication intercepts. Every asset humanity had cultivated during their time in Council space, suddenly activated with one purpose: find the children. On the Council Station, Junho arrived at the human delegation quarters. He taught at the cultural exchange school where the children studied. His face was pale. "I saw them," he said. "The Vex operatives. They were at the school yesterday asking questions about the program. I thought they were just curious. I should have reported it." "I should have—" "You gave us information," Jiwan interrupted. "That's enough. We need everything you remember about them. Every detail." While Junho described the operatives, the Council security chief arrived at the human quarters. He was a Belgarian, a species known for their careful approach to law enforcement. "Ambassador Doyen, I want to assure you that we are treating this with utmost seriousness. We have sealed the station and begun a systematic search. We will find the children through proper channels and procedures." Doyen looked at him. "You have 6 hours. I appreciate your concern, but these matters take time. We must be thorough. We must follow protocols." 6 hours, Doyen repeated. "After that, we handle this ourselves." The security chief's translator struggled with the undertone in Doyen's voice. It finally settled on rendering it as absolute certainty. The Belgarian felt a chill run through his 3 spinal columns. "Ambassador, I must remind you that taking independent action would violate Council law. It could result in sanctions or—" "6 hours, Doyen said again. He turned away, making it clear the conversation was over. The security chief left, troubled. He contacted the Council leadership immediately. An emergency session was called. Species leaders gathered in the chamber, many of them annoyed at being pulled from other duties for what seemed like a criminal matter that should be handled through normal channels. The council arbiter, an ancient being from a species that had helped found the council, addressed the assembly. The humans are demanding the return of their children within 6 hours. They have implied they will take military action if this deadline is not met. We must make them understand that such actions are unacceptable. They're bluffing, said the Vex delegate. He had been informed of the situation but showed no concern. No species would risk war over 4 individuals. They will negotiate. They always negotiate. They did warn us, said a quieter voice. It came from a Telrathi observer, a species known for their careful study of other cultures. In the chamber today, the ambassador was very clear about this specific situation. He was being emotional, the Vex delegate said dismissively. When they calm down, they will be reasonable. But humanity was not calming down. In the human quarters, Yunji's networks began reporting results. The children had been moved off station. A Vex transport ship had departed just 12 minutes after the kidnapping. It had used a private docking bay reserved for coalition military vessels. The ship was heading toward Vex space. Doyun received this information without visible reaction. He activated another channel. Admiral Minho, the targets are moving toward Vex space. Transport vessel registry number provided. You are authorized to intercept. Understood, Minho's voice came back. Fleet is entering jump space now. We'll be at the council station in 90 minutes. Across the council station, human civilians began receiving messages. They had 1 hour to board human ships and depart the station. No explanation was given. None was needed. Every human understood what it meant when Protocol Guardian was activated. They moved quickly and quietly to the docking bays. The council noticed this movement. Some species thought it was fear, that the humans were evacuating out of concern for their safety. Others, the ones who had studied humanity more carefully, recognized it for what it was. The humans were clearing the area before a fight. Doyun stood at a window overlooking the vast expanse of space beyond the station. Jiwon approached him quietly. The Vex have sent a message, she said. They admit to taking the children. They're calling it protective custody. They say the children are safe and will be returned once we agree to renegotiate the Tarless mining rights in their favor. Did they send proof that the children are unharmed? Doyun asked. No. Doyun's reflection in the window showed no expression. Then we proceed as planned. The council is calling for you to negotiate, Jiwon said carefully. They're saying this can be resolved peacefully. It could have been, Doyun agreed. Right up until the moment someone touched our children. Now there's only one resolution possible. The 6-hour deadline ticked down. 3 hours passed, then 4. The council sent multiple messages requesting negotiation. Doyun ignored them all. Admiral Minho's fleet arrived at the edge of the system. Then more ships arrived and more. The council's sensors began registering human military vessels they hadn't known existed. At 5 hours and 50 minutes, Doyun received confirmation. The children had been traced to a facility on Velkara, deep in Vex Coalition space. A fortress world that had never been successfully attacked in 40,000 years of Vex history. At 6 hours exactly, Doyun sent one final message to the Galactic Council. It contained no threats, no demands, no diplomatic language. Just a simple statement of fact: we warned you. Then he gave the order that would change everything. Execute. The Galactic Council chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of carefully maintained space, a massive structure that floated in the void between star systems. Inside its transparent walls, representatives from 6,000 different species conducted the business of keeping peace across the galaxy. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some saw in spectrums humans couldn't imagine. Some communicated through colors, sounds, or chemical signals that required translation devices to understand. Doyun stood at the human podium, a small platform that felt insignificant compared to the towering structures used by species that had been part of the council for thousands of years. His dark suit was simple compared to the elaborate costumes and biological displays around him. He spoke clearly into the translator, knowing his words would emerge in 6,000 different forms across the chamber. Humanity wishes to clarify our position on violence, he said. His voice remained calm and professional, the tone of a man who had spent years learning to navigate diplomatic waters. We are a peaceful species. We believe in negotiation, in compromise, in finding solutions that benefit all parties. There is very little we consider non-negotiable. A ripple of approval moved through certain sections of the chamber. The humans were well liked by many species. They were generous with their trade agreements, curious about other cultures, and willing to adapt to different customs. In 20 years of council membership, they had never initiated a conflict or refused a reasonable compromise. However, Doyen continued, and something in his tone made several translators pause to recalibrate, there is one absolute rule in human culture. One line that must never be crossed. We ask that all species present understand this clearly. From the Vex Coalition section, a large reptilian delegate made a sound that translators rendered as dismissive laughter. The Vex were one of the oldest and most powerful alliances in the Council. They controlled resource-rich systems and had military forces that dwarfed most other species. They found the young human species amusing in their earnestness. "Harm a human child," Doyen said, his words falling into a chamber that had grown quieter. "And there will be no negotiation, no compromise, no mercy. We will not stop until justice is absolute. This is not a threat. It is simply information about who we are." The Vex delegate rose to his full 3-meter height. His scales gleamed under the chamber lights as he activated his own translator. "The humans mistake emotion for strength," he announced. "They confuse sentimentality with power. We of the Vex Coalition have existed for 40,000 years. We have seen countless species make such claims. Yet civilization requires rationality. It requires the ability to negotiate even when emotions run high. To suggest otherwise is primitive." Other delegates murmured agreement. Several species nodded or made equivalent gestures. The idea that any civilized race would abandon all diplomatic channels over a single member seemed absurd to beings who thought in terms of species survival rather than individual lives. Doyen looked at the Vex delegate for a long moment. Then he simply said, "We have warned you." He sat down. The council moved on to other business. Trade disputes, border negotiations, resource allocations. The usual work of keeping thousands of species functioning together in relative peace. Outside the chamber, in the cultural district of the council station, Doyen's daughter Hana played in a park designed to accommodate children from 100 different species. At 7 years old, she was part of a new program meant to foster understanding between young members of different cultures. She laughed as she chased a Telleran child, whose 6 legs gave them an unfair advantage in tag. A Morgothi child floated above them both, changing colors to show delight. Jiwan watched from a nearby bench, her eyes constantly scanning the area. She had served in human military forces for 15 years before taking this position as head of security for the diplomatic mission. She found the council station remarkably safe by human standards, but she never let her guard down, especially not when children were present. "The little ones are having fun," said Captain Hayek, settling onto the bench beside her. He commanded the human diplomatic vessel Steadfast, which remained docked at the station's military port. "The program seems to be working well." "It is," Jiwan agreed. She watched as Hana helped a smaller alien child reach a climbing structure. "They don't see the differences we see. To them, playing is playing. That's the hope," Yuk said. "Raise a generation that thinks of other species as friends from childhood, and maybe the future is brighter." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the children play. Neither of them noticed the 3 Vex operatives who had positioned themselves at different points around the park. Neither saw the small devices being placed at strategic locations. The Vex had carefully studied human security patterns for weeks. They knew when shift changes occurred. They knew which guards paid attention to which areas. They knew exactly how to create a moment of confusion. The devices activated simultaneously. They didn't explode or cause harm. They simply emitted a frequency that caused every electronic device in a 50-meter radius to reboot. Cameras went dark. Communication devices fell silent. Even the translator units worn by the alien children stuttered and reset. In that moment of technological blindness, the Vex operatives moved. They were fast and efficient. Hana and 3 other human children were grabbed and carried toward a maintenance entrance. The alien children scattered in confusion, not understanding what was happening. By the time they started making distress sounds, the Vex were already gone. Jiwan's device came back online 20 seconds later. She looked at the park and immediately knew something was wrong. The human children were missing. She activated her emergency beacon even as she sprinted toward where she'd last seen them. Hyuk was right behind her, already contacting the Steadfast. Across the council station, alarms began to sound in the human section. Not the general emergency alarms. Special alarms that most species had never heard. Alarms that had been installed 20 years ago with the hope they would never be needed. In the council chamber, a message interrupted the proceedings. Doyen listened to it through his earpiece. His face went perfectly still. Then he stood and walked toward the exit without a word to anyone. The Vex delegate watched him go with satisfaction. The humans would learn their place now. They would understand that their warnings meant nothing to a species with real power. The children would be returned unharmed once humanity agreed to certain trade concessions. It was a simple matter of leverage. He had no idea that the message Doyen received contained 4 words that would change the galaxy forever. The children are taken.